All right, it is good afternoon to everybody. It's 2:01 p.m. Write that down on October 19th, 2020. My name is Don Gosney, and I welcome everyone to the meeting of the West Contra Costa Unified School District Citizens Bond Oversight Committee. Will you all join me in saluting the flag of our nation? If you don't have one in front of you, just try to imagine the stars flying. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. All members of the public are welcome to speak on any issue today that is on the agenda. Please use the tool to raise your hand and I will call on you at the appropriate time. We also offer an opportunity under public forum to speak on any issue under the control of the CBOC that is not on the agenda. We request public comments be limited to no more than 3 minutes. Under public comment, with limited exceptions, the CBOC is not allowed to reply to comments or questions. Because this is an online meeting, I ask that if anyone other than staff wants to speak, they use the raise your hand feature and wait to be called on. Please do not talk over each other. Remember to unmute yourself when you want to speak and then mute yourself when you're done. Just a reminder to please silence all phones not being used for this meeting. Shoo away the dogs and maybe the little kitties and partners that might interrupt your meeting. And don't forget to smile so all of your adoring fans across the world can see how happy you are to be here. Okay. Can we get a roll call, please?
Sure. Okay, yeah, John Anderson.
Here.
Ken Burns.
Not here.
Maisha Cole.
Present.
Sally DeWitt.
Here.
Lupe Anyana.
Here.
Don Gosney.
I am here.
Lorraine Humes.
Here.
Anton Young here.
Here.
And Mac Moore is here. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 present of 9. So we have a quorum.
That's always a good thing. All right, before we go on to approval of the agenda, I just wanted to point one thing out here. You know, as we approve this agenda, I want to give special thanks to district staff for the numerous items they added today. A lot. And thank goodness they don't have to print it all out. That was what, 428 pages I printed for you, Lorraine? That's a bunch.
Yeah.
Between this meeting and the one 2 weeks ago, that was over 900 pages. That's a bunch. And many kudos go to Melissa Payne for her efforts to get me the staff submissions with sufficient time to put everything together before the deadline. You don't know how much I appreciate that. For these Monday meetings, I have to have everything posted by 2 p.m. on the Friday before. That keeps me out of Brown Act prison, at least on that charge. In recent months, though, I've been posting things much later than that, but because of staff's effort this month, we beat the deadline. I didn't even know what to do with myself the rest of the afternoon. As I also want to thank staff for the reports in this packet. This is far and above what is required. The public needs to know how a school is designed, what goes into the planning, who is responsible for providing input. They need to know what sole source resourcing is all about and why we embrace it. And they need to know about tax rates for the bond measures. All of that is included in this today. So it gives me plenty of ammunition when they say, well, you're keeping secrets from us. Well, no, it was on our agenda packet. Yes, they didn't need to provide this, but they did. If the CBOC and the public takes advantage of this, perhaps they'll become more trusting of the district. On another note, I routinely hear from CBOCers because an item of importance was not placed on the agenda. One of my jobs as the chair is to put the agenda packet together. This is something of a balancing act, and sometimes things are out of balance. Our goal is to have 2-hour meetings, but we haven't had a meeting that lasts less than 3 hours in a very long time. Many CBOC members have made it clear to me that the meetings last too long, and I agree. I listen to what you say and I try to address this as best I can. Often this means deferring an item or two to a later meeting. I have to balance what needs to be addressed now with what can be addressed at a future meeting. And nonetheless, sacrifices need to be made to keep our meetings down to a reasonable amount of time. While these meetings are mostly attended by staff in the CBOC, we try to attract members of the public, and for some reason, most members of the public shy away from meetings that go on and on and on. Go figure. I apologize for taking an additional 2 minutes of your time right now, but sometimes things have to be said. Okay, is there any question or comment on the agenda as it's presented? Okay, I appreciate that. And
Sally's
Louis,
waving. Or
what?
Sally?
Sorry, what?
Yes, I have a comment on the agenda, but this may not be the right time. I noticed that a couple of the links are not correct. I'm sure that they're in the agenda, the items, but for example, the CBOC meeting calendar link, it leads to the report 2.
Well,
and
report 2 is pretty
things
important.
like that. It is, but it's not called
I-
the meetings calendar. So I'm just saying there's a couple of errors in the links. One of them is the AR19. So that's how I figured it out, actually.
All right. Well, while we're talking on the basic stuff, I'll get that swapped around real quick. I can do that. I did want to say that, Louis, I did not know what particular order you wanted to address most of the items that you have, so I'll just leave it in your hands to just do whatever you need to do on that, okay?
Mhm.
All right. Do we have any public comments that are for items not on the agenda? Lorraine?
Yes. I have one that's not on the agenda, and I just want to bring it up. Several of us, the newer members didn't, but several of us got an email from Greg Visnia offering to do some training for us. And we can't have any discussion on this, but what I would like to do, I think we owe him a reply, and I'm very glad he volunteered to do it. But so I'm going to contact each of you. I'd like to contact each of you, and then I'll see if you're interested in the training, and I'll organize it through Don and Greg. I just wanted to give you a heads up. I'll be sending you an email on it. That's all.
Are there any other public comments?
Should I add that, Don, that the discussion, I mean, the item having to do with the annual report is a discussion item. It's not an action item.
We may, it leaves me the option of taking action if somebody makes a motion.
Okay,
Okay,
I'm with you.
all right.
Thank you.
And as just a reminder, as I just mentioned a few seconds ago, we are not allowed to comment on public comments. So I've documented it down. And I'd already addressed this earlier today when it was brought up to my attention, but now we're bringing it up again. So, okay. I'll turn things over to Louis for the staff reports.
All right, so why don't we go ahead and get started today. I think the organization of the agenda, the way we have it done, will work for us today. So I think we're fine to proceed. So if we can go to the report. And in order to kind of help the meeting along a little bit today, knowing that the agenda is 426 pages, I'll kind of just go quickly through the bond status update, and then we'll get into the meat and potatoes, which is really just the grand opening and our ed spec and like. So let's go ahead and proceed. So again, I'll just give you an overview of the projects where we are, and then we'll go through the photos for a couple of the projects that are active. So Michelle Obama campus, still under construction, although we're getting closer and closer to the grand opening ceremony coming up on the 29th, and we have a little PowerPoint for that. Construction within the main campus itself, the school, they're really just doing punch list items within the school itself. The bulk of the work is all transitioned now to the playground area. We're working on the north end of the south end of the property, which is all playground and parking. So it's a good feeling to know that we're getting closer to the end. Completion on this is going to wrap up in November, 100% construction on this phase. And let's hope, we know rains are coming, but if they hold off just a little bit longer, we'll certainly be able to get everything in time. Richmond High, critical needs. So this project is continuing on. Our construction completion date on this is February. We'll see that in the report. Work on the science building has been completed. The bulk of the work now focuses in on the gymnasium building as we complete making the building watertight. Roof is on. The exterior has been wrapped now and getting ready for stucco finishes on it. As well, at the same time, we're working on, which is a spin-off of this, and that's the healthcare center. we were working on the paving lot. The paving was actually completed along 23rd Street in preparations for the buildings. The buildings are just starting construction. I believe they released them last week. It's going to be about a 5 or 6 week build for the portable buildings before they'll ship up to us up north. We can go ahead and start getting those installed, and then finally wrap up with the completion of the healthcare center. For the Fairmont Critical Needs 2 project, this is a completed project. Contractor is actually just finishing up with some punch list items. I believe we had a door they had to finish up, but beyond that, the work is complete. And then we've moved on to what we call was the Critical Needs 3, Phase 3. This was just awarded by the board not too long ago. I believe it was 2 meetings ago. This is actually a painting project. We're going back into the classrooms and actually repainting the classrooms. So our original project had done fire alarm, had done all the flooring, and now we're going back and doing the touch-up painting after the fire alarm and conduit has all been installed. Under procurement is the Riverside Elementary School, critical needs stabilization, soil stabilization. This is actually, we've had proposals come in from our DBE entities. We're actually in the process of negotiating scope and final price, and we hope to be taking this to the board on November 4th. We've had 4 sessions so far, and we'll have another session this week. E-rate is still on hold pending funding. And then Core Moss Fall Protection, this was submitted to DSA on October 14th. We're hoping to have comments back starting this week. In November, we'll have this project actually stamped out of DSA so we can begin construction. If you recall, this is a project that we've already actually awarded the contract. We had to go back to DSA with the plans, and so we're kind of on hold until it comes back out. Unfortunately, though, with the weather, and I think we've talked about this before, this project will probably hold until spring, knowing the weather will allow us to open up the roof later this fall. Pinole Valley High, the fields restoration and bleachers. So we've talked about the increment 1, which is the baseball field, all the upgrades mainly to all the fields is out of DSA. The piece we're waiting on is the bleachers. Talking with the architect last week, we are hoping to have comments. We actually have comments back, waiting for our plans to come back. Their anticipated date is either by the 30th this month and no later than the 6th of November. So as soon as that comes back, we'll be looking to put that project out to bid. Lake Campus we'll get into. We have a presentation for that tonight. And then our other critical needs projects, we actually have architectural proposals going out for Cameron, Collins, and Shannon. Next slide. So here's the progress on Michelle Obama. You can see that the landscaping work is finishing. Here the trees were just planted. These are some of our bio detention areas. If you look on the right-hand side, there's lots of planting around the campus, and if you ever drive by, you'll notice that there's big, spacious kind of landscaped areas, and all those areas actually are bio detention where we treat our water on site before it discharges out into the public right-of-way. You can see the work on the left-hand side. This is the south end of the property where we talked about earlier. This is where the fields are going in currently. Lots of activity out there, lots of concrete being poured. Every day is changing so quickly. It's amazing how fast it comes along when you're really out in the dirt and just doing the site work alone. This is the inside of the Learning Suite North. You can just see the color patterns. Very nice building. In fact, we had a walk today with Cabinet. Superintendent was very impressed with what he saw. We had our educational leaders there. Everybody's really excited to open this campus up as we move forward with the suite design. Next slide. So on the left-hand side, we're looking at the community garden area, outside learning. This is on the 41st Street side. And then we have the lunch shelter on the back end of the multipurpose room. And we've talked about it before, but those are the roll-up doors that will actually open to the fresh air. Students will be able to pass in and out of the multipurpose room out to there'll be tables underneath these shade structures when the weather's conducive. Next slide. And again, this is just looking from the south end back towards the building. You can see where this excavator is sitting right now. This is actually where the play structure is going to sit. So the grading going on here was in preparation as of today, it actually has concrete poured around it, getting ready for the flight structure itself. Next slide. And Richmond High, exterior finish, you can see we're much past this at this point. This was the insulation board that goes on the outside of the structural framing. This has been wrapped now and is on its way for a stucco finish. Next slide. And this is looking at we talked about biodetention areas for the Michelle Obama campus. These are actually our biodetention areas for the improvements for the gymnasium. So again, all the storm water from around the site will be pumped into these raised planter beds. It'll be refiltered, and then what's not absorbed into the ground will be discharged out into the storm system. And here you can see some of the finishes going on the inside. So drywall is progressing on the inside, as well as storefronts and doorways. Mechanical systems are nearing completion within all the dance room, weight room, and locker room. And this is to look back at the existing Richmond High building. This is where the gymnasium used to be attached to it. That's why you see the sheetrock finish. They're beginning on this work now. We've come to agreement what the exterior skin will look like. There's a new foundation that has to be poured around this, and I believe they're in progress of doing that. And we'll be making this watertight before the rains come. On the left-hand side is where our elevator goes, our trusty elevator. It's been one of our sore spots. We just found out that our elevator manufacturer, the plant was closed for 2 weeks due to COVID. So it's pushing our elevator out about 2 weeks. So we're looking at probably mid to late November now for delivery date. Next slide. If there are any questions on those reports before we move on to the Michelle Obama grand opening. Hearing none. The grand opening is Thursday, October 29th at 11 a.m. It'll be streamed live on Facebook Live. We'll be given the addresses down below. There's questions of how do you access? Well, it's Facebook Live. And again, there's two the website access addresses down below.
They also have an explanation on the main, which I did have up, but then they moved. But there is more of an explanation of how to attend on the main site when you get the banner for this. So there's a full paragraph that tells you about how to get there.
Okay, and this just happens to be our committee. Maisha Cole is one of our community members, Principal Velez, Rachel Forrest from our communications department, Bobby Jordan, as well as Ellen Mejia Hooper from the facilities department, and Maria Munoz from communications. So you can see the nice photo of those folks on the front steps. Filming of the grand opening will occur this weekend. It's on Thursday and Friday when they'll be doing the filming. Next slide. And you want to go through this?
Yeah, so the agenda includes a student MC as well as 3 student speakers who will highlight different learning environments. We have our PTA president, who we're happy to have as part of this call as well. A board member, superintendent, and the principal will all give speeches. Each speaker will highlight a different area of the campus, so you're able to see all the different spaces across the campus in this instead of looking just at one view at a podium, which is kind of the virtue of being able to do a virtual ribbon cutting. We'll also include an aerial flyby, a band performance, and the ribbon cutting will happen across the campus simultaneously via the power of video.
Excuse me, Ellen. Ellen?
Yes.
Sorry, you just mentioned the aerial flyby. I'm sure that this is not an F-16 flying by. Is this a drone?
This is a drone being able to, so you'll be able to see a bird's eye view of the campus.
Okay, I just want to make sure you understand that drones have to be permitted in the city of Richmond, and most drones do not meet the standards. This isn't Pinole where anybody can fly a drone. We have severe limitations on what a drone can do. So I'm sure you don't want to be in violation of the law on this.
Yes, and we have a professional video photographer who's doing this process, so we will double check with him that he has the proper authorities.
Yes, with the police department of Richmond.
Okay,
Thank you very much, Don, for that
Yes.
information.
thanks.
Next slide.
So the advertising went out. It was available on the Michelle Obama School site, Facebook, as well as their Instagram and school webpage, as well as going out to the school community through Class Dojo, Seesaw, and the classroom teachers. It's also on the front banner of the website. We also have invitations that went out, and I hope everybody on the committee received their invitation. It came out today. There were other VIP guests who were invited in a similar manner.
Ellen?
Yes.
At one time they had talked about Michelle Obama coming because it's a virtual. Were you able to get her?
I believe there's still requests out there. I have not heard a confirmation of whether we were able to get a video from her or not, but there's still a desire for that to happen, and we have made several attempts to contact her organization.
Thank you.
Okay, and then we have our newsletters. Unless there's any questions, we'll just kind of thumb through these here. So we have the Michelle Obama, Richmond High. And again, these are all posted on the facilities homepage as well. This is the Fairmont status report, Michelle Obama status report, Richmond High status report. And that concludes our update. Any questions before we move on to Lake? All right, well, Ms. Mejia Hooper tonight is going to give us a presentation on the Lake rebuild and where we are with the bridging documents.
Thank you for having us this evening. The lake rebuild has been going along since May when we hired the bridging architect. And so we've been working towards the site-specific educational specifications and the bridging documents. The presentation, for the most part, covers the concept design, which is part of the bridging documents, but it really is a physical representation of what's in the ed spec, so it makes it easier to understand. So that's why we're focusing on the conceptual design versus the large ed spec document. But both of them will be provided, and the individual project ed spec needs to go to the board for approval to make sure that we have all of the documents in place as required by CDE. So why Lake? The school was originally built in 1956 with additional buildings being built throughout the 50s and 60s. There's no major work was completed since that original construction. There was information given on the seismic report and the facility master plan that, due to the conditions of the building, Lake was not recommended for modernization. You can see the condition and functionality score for this was out of 100, so we were way low on the scale as far as condition at 27 and function at 33. Throughout the years, technology has been added, just surface mount throughout the hallways. The original flooring is asbestos tiles that have been patched throughout the years with a variety of colors. The envelope isn't necessarily holding, especially around the windows. So overall, it's a campus well due for a replacement project. When we started off this project, we looked again at the historic and projected enrollments for Lake. Overall, the master plan called for the capacity of 450. We talked to the bridging architect about a range from 450 up to 530 to start seeing how that would fit on the site and what the needs were. After reviewing the historic enrollment, the overall settled was on 475 as the appropriate number for local needs. That gives us enough of a cushion that a few additional students beyond what the historic and projected enrollment will be will not push us over the edge of being over capacity, but not too much that we're overbuilding for this site. We also looked at the adjacent schools to make sure that we didn't have any dramatic growth or dips in the schools around the area. And as you can see, for the most part, we're pretty flat-lined. So we weren't concerned that we were going to have to readjust boundaries to make sure that we would need extra capacity for lake.
I'm sorry, Ellen. I'm seeing flat line in a lot of areas, except in the Montalvan area, which has got a 50% increase.
Right, and Montalvan really occurred because of the switch to K-8.
Okay.
So they were at K-6, and now they're going up to K-8. So that's the reason for that bump. I'm sorry, I should have clarified.
I appreciate that, because that does explain.
Ellen,
Yeah.
on your previous slide, they had the different grades, and I saw TK. What is TK?
TK is transitional kindergarten. So the governor a few years ago decided to move the age which kindergartners were allowed to start, which meant that they had to have their 5th birthday by September instead of by December that it used to be. And so able to capture those kids that turned 5 between September and December, or really January 1st, they created transitional kindergarten. So you have to have your birthday sometime in that time frame to be able to qualify for that program, which is why you see it's only half the number of students that there is in the regular kindergarten. Because only a segment of the population qualifies to be able to enroll in kindergarten. Us October birthdays are lucky people because we could attend TK if we were 5.
Will they go to first grade just like the kindergartners do?
No, they will transition to kindergarten proper. So they take 1 year of TK and then 1 year of kindergarten before moving on to first grade.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so the design build process really has 2 major components. We have the bridging architect that creates the basis of design, and then the design build entity, which is the combination of the architect and the contractor working together to be able to create the final documents and then construct the campus. So what we've been working on is the bridging architect since May. We're now we're in October, but we have basically completed the bridging document. So if we go to the next slide.
Sorry, Ellen, before you move on, between the bridging document and the final design document, who actually approves that? I mean, is it brought before the public? Does the school board approve it? Or is this done internally on deciding what our schools are going to look like?
Well, it'll be vetted out along the way, but basically once the bridging documents are approved and reviewed, then it is the basis for how we move forward with enrollment numbers and the overall design. And I think you'll see within this presentation today what really is the bridging documents, what they're about. And it was kind of setting the spaces and the sizing of the spaces, approximate locations for the eventual build of the school.
Okay, but sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. So these yellow areas, the reason why they're yellow is those are the areas that we also have more site input. So during schematic design and design development, there'll be involvement with the site as well as district leadership to refine the design. So there are opportunities for more input throughout the process, as well as the furniture process later when we're in DSA.
So the board approves the educational specifications, which is the pathway. So now I think your question was, does this come back to the board for another approval? It doesn't. It's the education specifications, which is the guide that guides us forward.
Okay, I mean, you're right that it does. I was asking, does it come before the board? But at the same time, I'm asking, does it actually come before the community, or it's just we given the check to sign and saying, trust us, we're just gonna build you a school that we think you're gonna want? Or again, does the public have any say or input in it? If nothing else, just to look at it and say ooh or ah or oh my God.
Well, it'll come before the facilities committee several times during the design process, and mostly at the milestone components during the DD or design development phase, schematic phase. And so those are all public forums for the public to communicate in, as well as we'll be sharing with the facilities group for the lake community. So they have their own facilities group that was part of this bridging document, and they'll be actively involved as we move forward.
And I know we've touched on this just a little bit, like at the facilities meeting last week when I brought it up, that this is a different forum with a different group of people and a different set of records, that I'm concerned that the community is being left out of the loop. And by the community, I don't mean the school community of the parents or even the students, but I mean the 70% of the population that gets to pay for all of this the rest of our lives, that we're kind of being left out of the loop on this stuff, at least being brought to our attention. Because saying that it's being brought before the facilities committee, most people have no idea that we even have a facilities meeting or facilities committee. They know we've got a school board. And it's like, well, you should have attended this other meeting that we held during the middle of the workday to learn about it. It's just a concern that I have. And I mean, I will be addressing this at other forums as well, because I just think that the public is being left out of the loop, at least being notified about a lot of this stuff.
Okay.
All right, so the process for the bridging architect, we have the program, which really is that EdSpec process that sets which spaces there are, how many of them they need to be, how big they should be, as well as the initial site investigation that led to the site analysis. Those two together produced the layout and options for the adjacencies and created the site diagrams. Once we had the site diagrams, we looked at the phasing, and there was cost estimating exercise done across the layout and phasing portions of this project. As you can see throughout this, we had community, which was the local school community, as well as the faculty committee meetings, staff check-ins, and tours of Michelle Obama, as well as a meeting with the city of San Pablo to talk about approach to the campus. So in creating the specifications, there's a bunch of different documents that go into this. So we were trying to break down what that really looked like. So we start with the district-wide EdSpec and the material and product standards. Those two get put together with what the school input is, as well as specific things that are going on that particular site, and any code and agency requirements that come with a particular site. Those together develop into the suite of documents that we call the basis of design documents, which include the EdSpec, the site-specific EdSpec for lake, the phasing plan, which identifies key adjacencies, concept plans that set forward what the different buildings are, and a idea of what the floor plans could look like. The material and product standards is brought forward as a district document. And there's descriptions of the building systems, such as your structural, mechanical, electrical, and low voltage systems. So we have to understand the site goals, define the learning approach, and all of these components go into creating this basis of design document. Here's a list of who was involved in that process. We had a variety of stakeholders from the district, or from the school site itself, as well as San Pablo, and the design team was Perkins Eastman, who had their suite of consultants. So as far as the existing site plan goes, this campus is extremely unique. We have multiple streets that actually dead into the campus. So there's 11th Street and 12th Street that are both two-way streets that dead end into the parking lot. We have Manchester Avenue, which is over here, that doesn't at the moment go through except for a pedestrian pathway. We have another pedestrian pathway that comes off of Kelly. The site is relatively long and skinny with a flood area along Giant Road, which also has a railway and noise that comes from this direction. The school attendance area actually goes to the south of the campus, even though the front door is facing the north. But the vehicular access is easier to get to from the 11th and 12th Street side. The Head Start building has already been demolished. Otherwise, we have two main classroom buildings, the admin office, the multi-purpose room, and a variety of portables. As far as our rebuild goals, simplifying that traffic approach, maximizing the capacity that could be built without disruption, so we didn't need to spend additional dollars on temporary housing, creating a flexible learning environment to stay true to learning styles of today, and maintaining the master plan budget. In addition to that, the site committee really brought forward the idea that they would really like a one-story solution, a noticeable front door that's more of an entry and a celebration of entry than what the current design is, and maintain access from Manchester and Kelly, which are those two pedestrian places on the south and east of the campus. So the new site plan shows a admin library community space in this yellow and orange color, as well as a dedicated drop-off on this side. We have first through third grade classrooms here, fourth through sixth here, a multi-purpose room with the kitchen and a kindergarten preschool complex on this end, with the playground being maintained on the side and the grass in the predominantly in the flood area.
Ellen?
Manchester, yes.
Sorry. I saw that the library is on both sides of the administration building. What is the little library for?
Oh, that's not actually the little library. That is a book room.
Oh, okay, good.
So that's where they store the curriculum and textbooks.
Mm-hmm.
So as far as spacing goes, the idea is that the area in green would be built first while the existing campus is still in operation. The only building that we would bring down was the kindergarten pod building, which is somewhat underutilized. And there's areas that we can at least temporarily use for kinder while this first phase is under construction. Then this area, these new buildings would be opened up and the blue area would go under construction. And past that point, once these are ready to open up, they'll start on the fields and finish up those areas. The parking would be interspersed between the summers.
Mm-hmm.
So as far as the building plan goes for the administration, we have the front door here, which would be a controlled entry point with a second set of doors. We have the nurse and principal and what would be a traditional administration wing on this side. We have on this side the full service community school component with the beacon directors and a variety of spaces, both larger and smaller, for different size groups, including speech and psych. And the orange area is the parent room, community room, and table space for the library. This is the main library with the books in it. This collection of 3 spaces has really worked out well at Michelle Obama to allow the multiple ways of using these spaces. After hours, these 2 rooms can be opened up and used as one space for tutoring nights, PTA meetings, those kind of things during the day. When the librarian is present, they can open the library book area with the table storage. So a lot of different options about how to use those spaces to maximize these areas that can go underutilized otherwise. On this side, we have the teacher lounge and the staff prep room, as well as the book room.
Ellen? I
Yes.
know in the specs later, they talk about safety with doors that only open out and sort of like that. But with this
Yep.
era of terrorist attacks on schools, is there certain specs that you have to follow to make sure it's safe from that, like bulletproof glass on the windows or something like that?
The best practices for creating a campus that's guarded against intruders like that is to create layering of perimeters. So our first perimeter is the fencing around, as well as the front doors that are open to be welcoming, but there's a second set of doors that are locked that you have to get buzzed through to be able to access the campus. So there's a lockdown procedure that can happen there. Beyond that, we're limiting the suite design actually allows you to limit the number of doors into the classroom areas, which really helps with the ability to do lockdowns. Because it's a controlled number of doors, with it being more than one, so that there's multiple exit points, but not so many that there's the ability to have some open and some closed. So there's layers to it, and so that's definitely within our consideration.
On the administration, it seems like a lot of buildings facing it to the outside. Are those the office buildings? Do they have glass and windows, or are they? Yeah, along there.
We do have windows, yes. The principal and vice principal, we want them to be able to see what's happening in the front parking lot and who's approaching the building, so that's an important safety feature. The classroom or the staff lounge may or may not have windows on this side. It's not defined at this point.
Mm-hmm.
The community room most likely will have windows facing out, because this is an after hours event type of space, so it will be used both during the day and after school. So it's important to have windows facing the exterior.
So it's just the fence that is the perimeter protector in that case.
Yeah, there is, though the fence will stretch between buildings, but the buildings themselves will act as a perimeter.
Yeah.
So that way you don't have so much fencing in the front to make it look more like a prison.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we have to walk that balance, and it is always a balance between the welcoming entryway and welcoming the community inside and keeping the protection of the students as well. So it's a balance to keep that, but there are many good references on how to do that successfully now, and so we're using the most up-to-date knowledge as we have available.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Ellen, I just want to remind everybody that the security that Lorraine is talking about is what prompted the windowless Kennedy High School and Richmond High School in the mid-1960s. And we all hear the uproar that continues on to this day because of that. And the fact that, and I tell this story all the time, when I was in 8th grade and we'd come down Cutting Boulevard with Honor Society going to the Bay Model in Sausalito, and we were a little bit geographically deprived at that time. And when we passed by Kennedy High School, we were absolutely sure that was San Quentin. And then I saw the signs. Oh my God, I'm going to go to school there next year. But I mean, that was the rationale at the time. No windows, no bullets flying in. But people say we don't like that. So where's the balance?
Well,
Thank
would it be, I guess it's prohibitive expense-wise to put the special glass in there?
Yes, the special glass is extremely expensive. And it's also not foolproof, you know. I mean, they call it bullet resistant for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
So if there's a will, there's a way, but the idea is to try to make it, again, hit that right balance.
Right.
The NPR is pretty traditional. You've got your dining area, your stage. This goes into an outdoor dining area, speed line and kitchen. So the suites provide a variety of learning spaces, similar to Michelle Obama. So we have studio spaces as well as a project room, a flex area in the center, and a few of the special ed support spaces are also intermixed within here, which gives us the most flexibility if there's a bump in enrollment in a particular grade level to be able to manage the different students without having to switch suites. The kindergarten has pairs of classrooms that work together with a joint staff area as well as joint toilet rooms with their own dedicated playground, which is all compliant with the CDE regulations. So the landscape plan has a really potential to be a really nice space. We are maintaining a community pathway that would lead around the backside of the campus to allow folks from Manchester to walk around to the front of the school as well as anybody off of Kennedy. We have green spaces intertwined within the suite areas. Bioswale that we were talking about has a potential of buffering the trash enclosure area, so that kind of stays not noticeable on the campus. We have playground structures for both the 1st through 6th as well as the kinder area and preschool. And so again, we're still early in the process, so these are concept images. This is not necessarily exactly how the campus is going to look, but it does give you an idea of the look and the feel of the space as well as the transparency from one area to another. This is the suite library, the open flex area. We have plans for clear stories to really get natural lighting into the middle of these big buildings. So it should be a really pleasant space. And this is a conceptual exterior image, which is again just showing mostly massing and sizing of the different buildings, but to give you an idea of what it could look like. And that's it for Lake. We want to pause.
Are there any questions on the presentation?
Looks like Mac has his hand raised.
Yeah, thank you. So going back on, thanks for that review. That was excellent. And thinking about the lake specific ed spec, was the impacts of COVID and potential design issues related to that incorporated into the evaluation of the site specific ed specs? And obviously we hope that this current pandemic is over by the time that this project is completed, but you know, I think this is, our eyes have been open to this possibility, and obviously there's been a lot of thought and discussion about how to reopen schools and the new way that classrooms and adapting existing classrooms. So I would hate to have this opportunity where we could incorporate any of the best practices in learning into this site-specific design that then of course could play into the master ed specs that we have for all the buildings. So do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, so the bridging documents do not speak directly to the COVID, and as we look at that, hopefully it's going to be a blip, in time over the life of the building. Nor can we afford to go in and build a building that would accommodate underneath today's guidelines for COVID return. But what I would say is the design for Lake, much like the Michelle Obama with the learning suites and the flex areas, allows much more open space for students to be spread out into a different configuration, much more flexibility than you would have in a traditional school.
The other component that's important is the approach to HVAC systems and the ability to adjust to 100% outside air, which is currently designed in Michelle Obama, and it's really just what we're doing, but it's an important piece of being able to change out the air as needed in all of our buildings. The other adjustment that we've made actually in the district standards is including hands-free faucets. So that's another component that we're looking at, changing out from the push button ones so that we have less contact with fixtures.
Thank you.
This is John Anderson. I can't find my hand raised. I got a couple questions. One, in looking at the design team, do they have a licensed structural engineer on that team?
So these are bridging documents. So basically, these are conceptual sketches.
I know that, but my experience is that even on bridging documents, because you're dealing with schemes and all of that, you still have somebody that's an SE, which is why that law exists. The Structural Act exists because of schools. But I'm really surprised that I don't see that. And then another question. Go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead and ask your second question.
Going back to your chart back there on the process. So they produce the bridging documents. You get those bridging documents. That's the way I understand your process. You get your bridging documents prepared, then you go out for your design build bid. Correct?
Correct.
Well, not design, but bid.
So the bridging documents are the pathway to go out to the design build entity to conceptually price the school.
Right. So then most of the design builds I've worked with the last, well, I'll just say 20. I've been going back further than that. But at that point, do you have a firm price? Because
yes, it's a negotiated.
You have a negotiated price. Now, in some of the discussion that Don was talking about this, you've got that yellow area in there where you get different feedback. If that increases their price, do you go and change the fee that the design builder is going to receive?
So there's two pieces of that. So every project, as you said, it would be a fixed price as our bridging documents and our educational specifications would lay out. But there is change orders that do happen naturally occur through construction. So there is a contingency for both district and for project. So the owner has a contingency and the design build entity has a contingency. But if there's scope creep, much as you're speaking to in that yellow area, if the district decides that they want to add an extra classroom or do something that differs from the educational specification, then that would be a price increase. And so it would either handle through contingency or typically it's handled through an amendment to the contract at that point in the stage before we enter construction.
And then that contract amendment has to go back to the board?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
But that's also the importance of involving the site folks in the bridging document exercise as well, so that hopefully most of those asks have been made through the bridging architect component and are able to be managed that way.
Yeah, the bridging document, in my view, is the most important because that really sets the scheme that these folks are going to have to, the design builder is going to have to work from to come up with their, roughly flesh out the final design and come up with a price.
Yeah. And
anything that occurs in the middle there is, as you say, a change order, or if it's something like adding, upgrading the facility and all of that, upgrading the facility in some fashion, then you've got to go back through and amend the contract.
Yes.
For the most part, the type of input that we're looking for is placement of things. So we have defined the quantities already of, let's just say, whiteboards, right? We've been able to define the quantities of them, but because we're not to the place of a final design, the exact location of where those would be mounted are not determined. So that's what we're looking for site input on, are these different components that have been defined but not necessarily particularly placed.
Okay, thanks.
Before we move on, just want to address to everybody, Sally, I did correct those two erroneous links that you mentioned. If anybody has any other links that I screwed up on, please text me at my my mobile number so I can correct them while it's still fresh in our minds. Thank you.
Okay, district standards.
So the overall objective for this was to make sure that our district standard documents were in great shape before commencing the next round of critical need projects, as well as the design build project for Lake. We'll review quickly the educational specifications versus the material products and why we have these two different documents and how they're used, and review of a summary of what's being updated. So the EdSpec document really defines what the spaces are, how big they should be, what should be inside of them, and how they should be organized comparatively to one another. This does not necessarily specify construction methods, but it does allow flexibility and really talks about the function and how the educational program translates into physical space and needs to be supported by particular elements of physical space. However, the material and product standards is what controls the level of quality for the different materials that are used within a design. We've really tried to define the performance requirements for each of the products and materials themselves, and allow flexibility for a wider array of products. However, some of these pieces, because we need them to talk to a district-wide mechanism, or because they're standards that allow us to have minimal stock and maintenance, we do some sort of sole source material. And so those products are identified in a sole source resolution that's planning on going to the next board meeting, and is really specific for particular items that we need, such as the lighting or EMS system that talk to from the individual school site to the district head end. So where we have controls, it's really important to make sure we have those sole source materials. So these two documents work together by the EdSpec creating the when and where different items are used, and the material and project standards defining the what those should be. And then that sole source resolution really defines those particular products that we need to have from a single source, so again, that they can talk to one another or create efficiency with maintenance. So the different changes, for the most part, the changes were made to the material and product standards, because those are the components that change out the most. There are materials that there are new ones available, there's ones that are no longer available, there's more information that we found out from our different architects through the completion of Michelle Obama and Richmond High, because new products are always being introduced, and so they recommend different things, and we look at them to see if they're applicable or not and add them to the standards if they meet our requirements. The update has more descriptive design guidelines to be able to talk about that individual product and how that should work with the system, as well as refining the introductory text. We made adjustments primarily about the green code because the requirements for building envelopes have been increased. So we really needed to address some of those components. And of course, technology advancements always change things. So those are the components that we had to address the most. In that process, some of those items needed to be updated in the educational specification. So the two documents are coordinated.
Ellen?
We also added better descriptions for the design build delivery method. Yes, sir, or ma'am.
That's okay. As far as the green codes, I'm aware that any new construction for homes in California have to have solar panel. Is there anything like that for the schools?
Yeah, well, sort of. It needs to be designed to be capable of having solar panels installed on them. So we need the structural integrity to be able to add solar panels.
Oh, but you don't have to put them up at this time.
You don't have to put them on right now. It's not part of the code, but you do need to make the space allocation available and size it appropriately.
Very good.
Okay, so the sole source resolution, we've removed aluminum windows and changed them to performance-based products. And we've really adjusted the roll-in refrigerator to a roll-through refrigerator, which meets the requirements of how food service can most efficiently run their program. In addition, we added the lighting controls because that again is the Lutron system that has to talk from the individual buildings to a district-wide hub. So we need to maintain the same system. Network cabling that supports our switches, and additional items to the speed line equipment, which again is within the food service arena, and it really helps because our technicians have had better success with some refrigeration components than others. So we are really limiting it to the pieces that have worked well for the district and that we're able to get continued maintenance on. So that leads us to the educational specifications that are specific to, or no, these are the educational specifics, the ed specs that are district-wide. Lake is a reflection of these. There were minimal changes created to this document since the last round that was passed in 2017, mostly within this general information section. Just so that we can further refine questions that came up in our last design build process. It's mostly detail. So I wasn't going to go through every page of this, considering the time that it would take. But if there is any specific questions on either the educational specifications or the district-wide standards, we're welcome to have them now.
Ellen, Lorraine here. I noticed that these were prepared by EP2 Integrated. Did they do it for the whole district and then they also did it for Lake? Is that, they took those from the district and they made it specifically for Lake also, didn't they?
So the education and specifications you see in front of you where you have IEP2. So IEP2 along with Darden were the original producers for the master plan back in 2015, 2016. So this is, we're just updating the document. So while IEP2 is no longer involved in it, it's an update to the document, so it's not a replacement of the document.
Okay, so they did it in 2017?
Yeah.
It's actually 2015, but adopted in 2016, correct?
No, the specifications
Oh,
were done post the master plan. So yes, it was completed in 2017 with IEP2, and staff updated them in-house with minimal consulting with IEP2.
Okay, thank you.
And I would just share that we keep, so within your packet, there's the elementary educational specifications district-wide, which is going to the board on Wednesday with the minor updates. The material product standard starts on page 138, and that's also going to the board this Wednesday. sole source resolution starts on page 175 and is going to the board this Wednesday. And then the lake project-specific ed specification starts on page 183. We keep a copy of the board-approved educational specifications as well as the material products and standards and sole source items on our district website, and they are referenced in the PMP. So once these are approved by the board, then we'll make that change on the district website. But at any time, if you would like more information about what is the board-approved document, which would also include the educational specifications for our secondary, middle school, and high schools, those are available on our website, and so you're welcome to take a look at them, you know, at any time.
Very good.
All right, I have 4
Before we move
questions.
into,
I'm sorry.
no, Don, I was just going to say, are there any questions before we move into reports?
Yes, I do. I've got 4 questions, and I got 3 comments on here. The first, I'll mix the first two questions. When was this drafted, and is this a draft or a final?
Well, it is going before the board, so this is a final document as it stands today. It is a living document, though, and it's continuously updated.
Okay, because this leads me to essentially the next 2 questions. I said, who selected the group of individuals listed on that one page? For instance, it says that the CBOC was involved. I just don't recall how the CBOC was involved. I'm noticing a lot of those names have been absent from the district for quite some time.
And so this is the original report. So again, it goes back to the 2017 adopted education specification. So the updates to the specification come from, for lack of better terms, or as Ellen had said, is either changes, modifications to code, lessons learned coming out of the construction of Wilson and our other projects, and are just code changes that have driven us to make the changes. So again, this is an update to it. So yes, it does appear that these are the names that were on the original committee. And that's why it's the historical information that was left there.
Okay. I've got 3 comments on here. You know, we spend a lot of money building schools that are other than just bare boxes. You know, we got a beautiful Pinole Valley High School, got a beautiful Taj Mahal El Cerrito High School, beautiful De Anza High School. And sometimes it seems like we forget that we're placing these right in the middle of people's neighborhoods. So these are schools that they have to look out their front window and see every day. As they're driving by, they're seeing these schools. And we spend all this money on a beautiful facade for the school, and then we treat it like it's our, like a junkyard. At De Anza High School, you've got 47 signs in front of that school. 47 of them all over the place. The signs themselves, make it look bad. You know, for 4 years, you had a broken down ambulance parked between the buildings, right where you could see. You had pallets stacked up with blue tarps all over them. You can see. You can't park all that stuff behind the school where nobody can see it. But we need to pay more attention to the buildings that we have. If we're going to spend this kind of money to make a nice looking school, then we need to keep it nice looking and consider that it's not just utilitarian, that it's supposed to look good. And that leads me on to the next item. Then once we operate the school, even brand new Pinole Valley High School, within weeks of the ribbon cutting, you had orange cones out in front of the school, 8 or 10 of them, to help direct the people on the drop-off zones. And those cones were there 24/7. That wasn't the best look on there. Also, almost every new school that I've gone to, and we have visitor parking, but you got like 2 or 3 or 4 spots for visitor parking, and they're always full all day long. It seems like from staff, so there's no room for visitors to the school to actually park when they've got to get to the school. They got to park 2 or 3 blocks away to be able to get to it. But one of the other things, the last thing I've got to comment on here is you've got a section in here about the placement of a plaque and what's going to be on the plaque. And this is a concern for me because I know these plaques are not cheap, all right? But it's like a pat on the back for the school board members. It's a pat on the back for the architect or the bond salesman or the staff people that are working on it. And as a taxpayer, I get to pay for that plaque. And now that they're indoors instead of outdoors, we don't even get to see the plaque. But part of the problem too is, you know, we're patting people on the back like school board members that campaigned against building those schools, that campaigned against the bond measures that paid for the schools. And now for the next 40 or 50 years, you know, at taxpayers' expense, we get to see, oh, we're going to praise that person for this school. I have to ask the question, why are we spending money on plaques when they don't really serve the kind of purpose that the public taxpayer would like to think? It's not a paint job. It's not a new classroom. It's not smart boards. It's for the self-gratification of the people that thought that they were in charge. They weren't even spending their money for the most part. They're spending our money on these kinds of things. All right, rant over.
Okay.
I have a question, Mrs. Sally,
Yes, Sally.
and I have my hand raised, so,
Yep.
but I don't know
Yes,
if
you do.
anybody sees it.
I can see it.
Okay.
Yes, Sally.
Yeah, okay. So I think that this looks very good, and I'm pleased to see it. I do have a question, and it has to do with the note. And bear in mind, I've been doing the 2019 annual report, so this comes out of that work. At the end of 2019, we had a note in the report 13 about $3.6 million used to fund budget increases at 2 schools. I believe it was Wilson, now Obama, and Richmond High School. And I understand that additional money was approved in 2020 from the same source, with developer fees, as I understand it. There might have been some other sources, but that was, I understood that to be the main one. So the question I have here is that for the schools where these budget increases were approved, are those plans reflected in the facility master plan that includes the work being done funded by the developer fees?
I guess to answer your question.
And I guess the companion question would be, is the full total of both of those schools and maybe others, if there are any others, is the full total of the budget included in the consolidated budget report?
So for Michelle Obama, the scope of the facilities master plan was the campus replacement. So the additional funding sources do include our funding scope from the facilities master plan. Yes, that is true. For Richmond High School, the supplemental funding source being used for Richmond High School is actually for the health clinic. And so this scope of work was not conceived as part of the facilities master plan scope, but through reviewing the scope with DSA, the Division of State Architects, they then asked about the DSA certification status of the health clinic because it was in close proximity to one of the buildings that is part of the scope for the facilities master plan. And that then left us with a couple of options in order to continue the scope of the facilities master plan at Richmond High, for which we decided to then demolish and then replace the Richmond High Health Clinic. And so that scope was not conceived in the facilities master plan, but in order to do the scope of work of the facilities master plan, DSA added this on. And so it is a supplemental funding source paying for the health clinic. And so then to address the question about the funding that is reflected in the consolidated budget status reports, if you look in the top left-hand corner, it identifies that it's just Fund 21 and 35 that is being reflected in that report. Fund 35 is the fund when we receive funding from the state. For example, the Pinole dollars that we receive, it's going to go from the state to the county, from the county into Fund 35. And so the dollars that we reflect on this report only come from Fund 21 and Fund 35. Those additional funds of Fund 25, which is the developer fees fund, and then Fund 40, our capital facilities funds, those are only identified in footnote, not in the line item that you see in the consolidated budget status report.
Okay, so I I think I understand most of that. And here's my thinking on it, and I'll just to be very transparent. The general public doesn't have any real connection to these different funds. But what the general public has a strong connection to is what is being done to my school in total. And how is it prioritized against other schools and other work that's being done at the other schools. And to me, the facility master plan is what conveys the answer to those questions. What's being done at my school, and how, and what's the status of the completion, and what is the what are the priorities for completion of the entire master plan. I'm so happy to hear Louise, for example, tell us that this is a living document, because as soon as you need, as you note that you need something else to happen at a school, clearly that has to become part of the facility master plan. And the general public, if they have access to that facility master plan on the website or something like that, then they can easily see what's been done, what the budget is, how it stacks up, et cetera, et cetera. But when you parse out part of the facility master plan and tie that to some sort of source of funding, then the general public doesn't get to see the entire project for their school. Maybe, maybe not. Hard to tell. But you have it in your mind that it's 90% of the funding, but not 100%. So that's one thought that I have. The even worse, maybe in my view, if this is the case, is that you have told us about what looks to me to be a beautiful project management plan, the PMP. We've just seen the rollout of that. It looks great. Having developed one of those myself at a large corporation in our neighborhood, I know what that takes, and I know how important that is. It concerns me to think that there might be a portion in the multi-million-dollar category of projects that your group is doing that is not included in the PMP. Because if it were included in the PMP, then we would see it in PMP reports. And we would also be able to tie those reports to the facility master plan. So again, to summarize what I'm saying is, I would like to see the facility master plan capturing 100% of the projects that your group is doing and that is included in the PMP. If you have to report out a portion of it, great. I mean, that should be possible in your reporting. But the facility master plan should include 100%. Otherwise, how are you managing those projects in the multi-million-dollar category? They're not insignificant. And I planned to say this when we got to the annual report, but now I've said it because it's at this point in the agenda, and I'm going to touch on it again when we get to the annual report.
So there's a couple of pieces that I just want to share. There's a book that I've enjoyed. I read it in college. It's called The Social Construction of Reality, right? And so when things are conceived or when things are developed, a lot of times there's an intent at that time. What was the social construction of the document? So the 2016 Facilities Master Plan, at the time when that really came forward, the convention of that was really to speak to, here are the remaining bond funds, and here is the plan and the priority and the sequence and the scope associated with the remaining bond dollars. And so the Facilities Master Plan, I think, from its onset was really created to be a plan associated for the bond program. one of the things that we've done over the number of years is, I think we've really redefined ourselves as a department, is Louis Fries, who you guys know as the Associate Superintendent of Operations, was historically our Executive Director of the Maintenance and Operations Program. And so over the last, I would say 5 years in particular, there's really been kind of a merging of the house. At one point there was kind of like the bond program, and then there was the facilities program, and then there was maintenance. And I think really as he transitioned from maintenance into the district engineering officer role, and now as the associate superintendent, there's really been a merging of the homes. And so while the PMP was written to describe the management of the bond program, the people that you guys know, myself, Ellen, Louis, Masinja, we all implement these things across all 3 of those programs. And so a lot of the internal controls that we believe have really improved the management of the program don't just exist with our bond program, they do also exist for our facilities program and for maintenance. And I think one of the big things that we've learned over the years is the more we take these different perspectives, the more that we have a single way of doing things across these programs, the better all of our programs have become. So you're absolutely right. Managing the district's facilities isn't something that just lives in one department. It's something that when we're doing our best job, all of our departments are working together, they're communicating, and they're aligned. Because as we make these significant investments in improving our facilities, these are the facilities that we're counting on to provide a great learning environment for our students for decades to come, right? And so it's not a perfect answer to what you're asking, and I think we're learning more and more about what the ask really is. We need to provide better reporting for our other facilities funding sources, because there are projects that we do that don't receive any bond funding, but we're still doing those projects. And so how is that reflected? Because those improvements wouldn't be represented in the facilities master plan at all, because they're not receiving bond dollars. That doesn't mean we still have a proposal approval cover sheet that has to get signed. We still have the same implementation in our MUNIS system. So we are absolutely applying, I think, a lens to what we've built together here, in particular with the partnership through the CBOC. And we really want to look at how we can provide better reporting across our entire program, because I think you're right. We know what we're doing, but there's blind spots in transparency and the reporting. And people at their school sites don't know, right? They come to school and there's a new pay structure. How did that come to?
Exactly.
And so we are not there, but we are absolutely committed to it. And I think that there is so much that we have learned in our kind of dedication to this continuous improvement in the bond program that we're just trying to translate across those other departments in terms of reporting. And so I don't have those for you today. This isn't something that we're going to be able to produce together probably before the end of this calendar year. But it's something that each one of us in our unique roles are trying to bring our perspective to, so that we can be a lot more transparent about that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But
Melissa, that sounds great.
Today or tomorrow, but it's coming.
Yeah.
And I think these conversations that identify some of those blind spots that we have just in doing our jobs are what make them possible. And so I really appreciate the feedback and sharing of your perspective, because I think in understanding what you see, it helps us understand how we can better tell our story.
Melissa, I hear what you're saying exactly. I applaud you. I think it's been, it confirms what it appeared to me to be the case, which was it started out, you know, I've been on the CBOC now 4 years. So you're talking about something that's happened over the last 5 years, and I have definitely seen improvement, definitely. So you're going in the right direction. I'm out here as a cheerleader for you. And it was just a miss in my mind that I thought, whoa, 3.6 million in 2019. then an untold amount, because I can't see it, in 2020, it's a significant amount of money for any one of those schools. So I prompted, and then I will write more to you offline to see if I can convey, you know, the vision that I bring with me from my other position with Chevron, because it's very clear to me, and project accounting and project management and project reporting is a real specialized area. And I think I bring something to the table that might be helpful.
And we always appreciate your input, Tom.
I think you're definitely going in the right direction.
Thank you.
And if there aren't any questions, I can just use that as a perfect segue to jump into the financial report, because I think it's all related. So, Ellen, if you can jump to page 277 for me. So in the interest of time, I just really want to give you the two big highlights that I think come out of this month's suite of financial reports. And that is, here in report 13, we have added in the 5 CTE applications, which were approved by the state allocation board the last time we got together at the joint meeting. We are so proud of this. And so we are looking at, I believe it's almost $4.7 million that we look to receive here in the next 12 months as we continue to work forward to do the administrative work with OPSE. Because we submitted and also received additional state dollars at both of these projects, El Cerrito and De Anza, we'll need to go through the paperwork to pull out the CTE dedicated facilities and submit that paperwork. But this is priority funded with the state. And so we're just really excited, and in full disclosure, not reported here yet, but we have a couple applications in for Pinole Valley High School that are right at that funding line. So through SAB's action, if any dollars end up being returned to this fund, then there's a chance that we could get another CTE application already in right at the top of the list funded as well. And so hopefully we'll get to bring that update to you. But really excited about this, additional state funds coming in, and we'll work through, we'll submit our PIF letters to the state here in early November, and then we'll just continue to work through the paperwork and be happy to share with you when we think those dollars will be received over this next 12-month period. The next key page, I think, is page 280, and that is our variance report, because it is that very quick glance at what has changed over the last month. And that is that we had a burn rate of almost 2.7 million. And then the variance also identifies that CTE state funding that has been approved by the SAB. And so it looks like there's a couple of hands raised for the financial report. So
go to page 280. Sally, I think your hand was up from before, unless you just raised it.
We've got 3 hands at this time. It looks like first, Mac Moore.
Thank you. So that's great news. So the only comment I have is you. I think I heard you mention that the $4.7 million in CTE funds should be received within the next 12 months. And so therefore, on the placement of where that's going to be on report 13, I think it should be within the reporting period, not outside of the reporting period, because the reporting period is through June 2023. So just that comment, I think that it will sort of add to the incremental buffer that we have of resources available relative to the spending to complete the master plan projects. That's my comment.
And so, and just to kind of answer that, part of the reason why on the top of report 13, this is a report that we'll be working together to update. So its projection is actually through June of 2021. And so that's why we made that note, because there's a chance, like if it went the full 12 months, that we could receive it after June 30 of 2021. It's not what we anticipate, but it's possible. And so this report 13 is a report that we'll be working very closely with the CBOC as we extend that time period beyond the June 30 of 2021 to extend out into the later years.
Lorraine, you have your hand up?
Yes, I have a question on the consolidated budget status report for the master plan, back on page 267. You could go to that. Is that for the master plan? That's the, keep going, that's the general one. I want the green.
You want the green?
Yeah. Now I noticed a couple things. I noticed that in July, the future projects had nothing in the budget columns, the commitment columns, the expenditure columns. Then comes August, and all of a sudden you're having numbers up there. You're also moving your report note 5 from two charts to one chart. And in the, today I noticed in the status report, it has these amounts underneath the budgets. Is this planning for selling the bonds, or have you sold the bonds, or what's the story?
So the 2016 Facilities Master Plan is the plan for the Measure D 2010 and the Measure E 2012. And so Measure R is out in the future and is not part of this current plan. So what we did do was we went to the board, and the board approved the site budget authorization to move forward this final phase of the 2016 Facilities Master Plan. And so there are a series of sites that are in this final phase, and those are probably the sites that you saw. So you saw Collins moved forward, Cameron moved forward, Hercules Middle School and High School, we have that as a single line item in terms of budget because it's a single building that would be shared between the sites.
Yeah.
And so we have that combined budget of Hercules Middle and Hercules High School as a single line item.
Right.
It also includes Kennedy and Shannon. I think maybe I got all those right. And so this is the final phase of the 2016 Facilities Master Plan Critical Needs Project. And so those budgets were approved by the board, so the budgets are now allocated to those sites. And so as Louis mentioned in his project update, we're going to be issuing an RFP out to our pre-qualified architects so we can start the design process on some of those projects. And so does that help answer your question? So at this time, we don't have any additional future master plan projects. They all have an allocated budget, and we are in the planning and design phase for all of those projects.
But you don't have the money to do the projects. You're waiting to sell the bonds, right? See, now here on this one, it says
the bonds were sold already.
Oh, were they?
That money's
Okay.
in the bank.
Oh, okay.
That's why
Great.
if you look back to page 9, that's why those projects at the bottom portion of the page are now listed, because the board approved the budgets for those.
Yeah, I
that's why
noticed
making-
that was one of the things I noticed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Where I said we were getting ready to go out for architectural services for these. Okay.
And so really what's really kind of phenomenal is if you look at page 1 of report 13, the $23.6 million that's sitting there, most of those are our state funds that we got in for Pinole that we'll be adding to with the CTE state funds when those come in as well. And this is really something that, you know, we've been incredibly proud of. Mac had mentioned at the last meeting how we actually had a gap when we started the implementation of the 2016 Facilities Master Plan. I believe we had about 163 million and we needed 181. And as you can see, even as the approved budget stand at this time, we needed 188. And so we had a major gap to cover. And so part of covering that gap has come from the state dollars that we've received that then come back to leverage additional projects in the bond program, and some of the savings from the legacy projects over the years that have come in. I looked back, and I believe since 2016, we've returned about $8.7 million, mostly from legacy sites. And so it's really taking those state dollars and then some of the dollars that then get returned to fund balance that covered the gap and has now actually left us with additional dollars in the bank, which it's been a huge effort to do, but something that we're really incredibly proud of.
Yes.
So everything that you see here is just the Measure D, the Measure E, and then the state dollars.
Excellent. Thank you.
Don, you had your hand raised?
Yes, this is just a little clerical issue. Is there any chance that we can remove that left-hand bar of previews of the pages? Between everything else that's on the page, yes, the agenda packet itself is getting smaller and smaller. Thank you.
And so the last thing that I wanted to share in terms of the financial report, and I apologize, this is just an oral update, but for the program management plan, one of the things that we have found as we released that draft and had what I thought was a fantastic joint board meeting, we're really looking to improve the transparency and the accessibility of the document. And so as we speak, we are adding footers to each one of the pages. So as a very helpful CBOC member pointed out, if you'll print a single page of that document, you should be able to see in the footer which section you're in and then which subsection you're in. So we're making that change. We're going to hyperlink all of the appendices items within the document, because as you're reading that 76-page narrative, it can get really dense really fast, and I do this every day. So we're going to hyperlink those appendices to make them easier to access. And then the last thing that we're going to do is there's a couple of terms that we use throughout the document over and over again, like our bond controls management team, which to us, we know exactly what that is. We live it a day, but it gets completely lost in the document, even though it's referred over and over again. So we're working on some small graphics. We're not going to add a lot of graphics or full-size graphics, but we're working on some small graphics that we're going to embed within the narrative, just because we think that that will make the document so much more accessible when it's being read. And so because of that, we are not taking the PMP to the board here in October. We're looking to take it to the November 18th meeting, and there's two things that we're going to deliver before we do that. One, we're continuing to accept public comments and recommendations. We just believe that the ones that we've received are too valuable not to make, and so we're making those changes. We're going to publish all of the written public comments that we've received and staff's written response to that comment on the PMP website. And as soon as that is published, and it is long overdue, we are going to share that immediately with the CBOC so that you'll see it as soon as it goes live. And we're going to do all of those things before we go to the board. We just think that when we take this to the board and we ask them to accept it, it should be as final as it can be, with then subsequent updates, of course, being legislative updates, et cetera. But again, just really want to thank everyone here for continuing to just provide their recommendations and their comments. I think that this has become something even better than I thought it could be, and it's really because of everyone here, and we really do appreciate it. So that's the update for the PMP. And the last financial update is related to the draft West Contra Costa tax rate history and projections on page 280. So at the facilities committee meeting, which was held on October 13th, Dr. Wold attended the meeting and shared this draft document at the meeting, which is prepared by KNN, our financial consultant, which really identifies the projected tax rates, actuals for the historicals, and then projected tax rates for current and future years. And one of the things that you can see when you look at this is for Measure J, we are going to, this year, we will exceed the $60. And so a full report on this is going to come forward to the board and is anticipated for the November 4th meeting. Ms. Cha prepared a version of this, a cleaned version of this, which we provided that could be used in the annual report. But we did want to bring this brief update here to the CBOC today and to make sure that you had all of the information that we have, and want to thank you for your patience. It's pretty late this year based on the deferral. So if there are any questions, I will do my absolute best to answer them, but I might have to defer them to because Dr. Wold isn't with us today.
Melissa, I have a question. On this tax rate chart, you've got the numbers in red, and it says that they are stabilization rates. What's a stabilization rate?
So I'm going to do my very best to answer your question, and that is that every year our district meets with the county office to try to stabilize the tax rates to ensure that we meet the commitments that have been made across the measures. So if you look at the top of this document, you can see the target maximum tax by bond measure. And so there's an annual meeting that takes place with district staff and the county to try to stabilize the rate such that we do not exceed the target maximum tax. This year, that meeting did still take place. That was a meeting, I believe, that was held late in September. But despite best efforts, we are not able to resolve the Measure J. And so it will exceed the $60 this year.
Okay, I see. Thank you.
Before we continue, I just want to remind everybody, please use the raise your hand button and wait to be called on so that we don't overstep the people that have already raised their hand. And if you're a member of the public, I saw that Leslie Rector tried to raise her hand for a split second. Just if you want to speak, please feel invited to raise your hand as well. We want to hear from the public. Thank you.
And Mac, you have your hand raised?
Yeah, so and I suspect this may be something to pass along to Dr. Wold and or KNN. Obviously, folding in the new bond measure into this forecast would be very helpful for the public to kind of, see where we're headed with all the bonds, not just the historical ones. And I think, it probably can be done. I mean, it's just a matter of determining estimate of when the bonds are going to be taken down, et cetera. But I think the concern I have is that people may look at this chart and then just immediately add the $60 for the new bond measure on top of things when that's not exactly the way it's going to work. We're going to see drawdowns of those bonds and a gradual increasing of those rates associated with that bond measure while the historical bond measures are paid down. So that's I think it might be a good idea just in terms of managing expectations of where tax rates are going, that people don't jump to sort of the worst case conclusion. So just something to pass on to him if you get a chance.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
we'll bring it up. And yeah, I believe they did a schedule before as a projection, so we can make sure we talk to them about that. All right, well, there's no more hands raised.
So I think at this point, we jump back to page 281 and turn it back over to Ms. Nikia Hooper to share with us an update on how to update the 2016 Facilities Master Plan to incorporate Measure R.
All right. So we are actively working on updating the master plan. We're going to check in with our timeline again. So the reforming of the prioritization committee is well underway. We had the lottery for selecting the parents and students at the last facility committee meeting. So we had 55 different parents that signed up for the different slots. And we narrowed that down by school first and then by feeder pattern. So there's one parent from each feeder pattern and 2 students per feeder pattern. We also have various other committees that we're gathering together the recommendations for. Dawn is the representative from the CBOC. And so we're putting that all together now. We're also, with the community survey, I'll go over that in a moment. And then the HVAC study to bring in the priorities that came along with Measure R of addressing HVAC needs and technology. We're doing an assessment that is going out for RFP so that we can find a firm to complete that, which is in progress. Over the winter, we plan on getting the criteria settled. And then once the criteria is settled, we have prioritization, we'll create options. And we're hoping by the spring to have the updated master plan. So the participation in the survey and nomination forms, we have the community survey had 442 responses as of last Monday. Now we are over 1,500. So at the facilities committee meeting, there was a recommendation that the coverage for the survey might not have reached as many as we'd hoped, and especially the community at large. So we went back to our communications folks and said we need to get this out more, and we'd like to extend the deadline. So we extended the deadline to October, and they provided me with what the communications department completed, which included a campaign that occurred over 4 platforms: social media, district communication tools, website, robocalls, emails, text messaging, outreach to schools, principals, Bayside Council of PTAs and student groups, and Bay Area media. The district social media campaign ran for 2 full weeks on Facebook and Instagram with targeted audience of eligible voters age 18 to 65 living in the following West Contra Costa communities: Richmond, San Pablo, Pinole, Hercules, El Cerrito. The push reached over 12,500 people, with close to 1,000 people engaging with the post. The facility master plan has been featured in 3 of the 4 past superintendent community updates sent weekly on Fridays to a list of 8,300 people. It's also been sent to 28,000 students and their families that call West Contra Costa home. Communications also issued 2 press releases, one on September 29th, another on October 16th. The Richmond Standard, Bay Cities News, and SF Gate each picked up the release. To date, we have over 1,500 responses in English and close to 200 responses in Spanish. The total responses is almost 4 times as many as similar efforts in 2016. So that is what has been going on with the survey. As I said, the lottery was completed on the 13th for the prioritization committee for parents and students. Let's see. As far as the result, we went ahead and used an ID number that was issued to each of the lottery participants so that they could track which numbers were selected. Emails have gone out to those folks now to communicate the idea for the first meeting to be on October 27th. Next steps, we have that first meeting planned for October 27th. The results of the community survey will be posted on the website as soon as we make it through all of the new responses that we have gotten. And the RFP or RFQP process for the HVAC study is planned to be completed by November.
It looks like, Don, you have your hand raised.
Yes, I do, and I thank you. And again, I apologize for sounding like a broken record to the people that attend all these meetings, but this is a new audience and a new record that we're going on. And the outreach was an item of concern for me. I appreciate the fact that after I brought this up at the facilities meeting, that the outreach was extended dramatically, and it looks like the results showed a dramatic increase in the response rate. But I mean, I'm looking at the list on page 283, and you know, the community as a whole was left out of the process. It was only the people, the inside group, the teachers, the students, and the parents of the students at the schools that were being asked, what do you think ought to happen here? And not the taxpayers themselves. Because keep in mind, we're talking about another 175,000 people that are being excluded on there. And I appreciate the fact that a press release went out on Friday to some of the newspapers. I mean, we have 2 online newspapers here in Richmond, and it went out to one of them. I own the other one and I didn't get it. So that's why I was surprised to see the outreach. I checked with the emails I got from the communication director, and he apologized for the lack of outreach. This was a couple of days before Friday, but I will be back in touch with him just to remind him, because that there are more options out there. And it's not just the online newspapers, but you've also got things like the patch newspapers and the next doors all over the area to get the word out to everybody. Because last time we heard this presentation, the deadline had 1 more day on it, and now I'm just picking it up and finding out the deadline had another additional week. So for all intents and purposes, it's 1 more day from today. But yeah, it's important to me, you may have guessed by now, that we need to reach out to the community a little bit better than what we have been. We need to listen to people and say, no, we are not getting the word that you think that we're getting. Thank you very much.
Lorraine?
Yes, 2 questions. One, Ellen, you mentioned that the CBOC representative was John Anderson. On page 284, you have Don's name. Who is the official rep?
John Gosney. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. And secondly, I heard that the meetings for this committee are going to be Zoom meetings, or people can watch them live. Is this true?
Because the committee is not a public.
Yeah, it's a public
It is not.
meeting.
Is that how you have them set up?
We haven't made that determination yet.
Okay, and that would be a good thing to advertise if you do decide to do that. Thank you.
And Mac?
Yeah, this is a question for Ellen. And I may be off track here, so you feel free to correct me that I don't have all my facts straight. So I'm wondering what we're doing about the Mandarin schools. So and this is the quandary that I see is that when the facilities master plan was completed in 2016, that school didn't exist, and so there was no evaluation done. Now, it does exist. It's expanding. It's a very successful, popular program. So the enrollment's exceeding the campus, and obviously the parents have a very definitive idea of what they would like to do. So my concern is that I think it's entirely appropriate that their school be evaluated using the same criteria as this group is going to help determine. But if there isn't that evaluation of a site, then how would that occur? So I just wanted to see if there's been any thought to how the Mandarin School would be incorporated into the prioritization evaluation. Thank you.
So the Mandarin School is currently located at Sarah, and that was part of the original priority sites. So we do have data from the master plan originally on the Sarah campus. And so as criteria is developed, we will either use the physical space of Sarah as the site or the program for programmatic components that are part of the criteria. Until we know the exact criteria, though, it's difficult to answer that question because, I mean, it obviously depends on what we're trying to judge and what metrics we're getting. But we do have options for being able to address that school site.
And then I guess then my follow-up question is that I think there's maybe an expectation that you know, whether realistically that particular site could be expanded, or we're having to find another campus where they would go, and if that's a option that could be, or you know, is a potential option that would be considered if, again, as you said, the people say that, you know, the prioritization, you know, it shakes down where that, you know, school community is one of the priorities.
Yeah, there's certainly the difficulty with master planning is I can tell you about the process all day long. The results of the process I can never tell you, because if I did, then it would have been predetermined, and that's exactly not what we're doing, right? And so at this moment in time, the process is that we are going to take to the prioritization committee, ask them to create the recommended criteria list that gets prioritized, or that goes to the board. Once the board approves it, the prioritization list comes out, and from there we create options on specific scopes for each one of those campuses. And then that returns back to the board, normally with some community involvement in between those two steps. And at this point in time, because we don't know the results of these different pieces, steps along the way, I can't really talk to what will happen. But it's certainly a possibility. And no matter what, this is a district program, like you said, a successful district program. It needs a place to live. What that place is needs to be determined by the board, and can happen through this process.
Thank you.
All right. I see there's no more hands raised.
Are you turning things back over to me?
Turning things back over to you, Don.
Thank you very much. Okay. I don't believe we have a board liaison here, but I'm going to ask, do we have a board liaison report? Hearing none. Then we're going to move on to our CBOC reports. We have 4 items on the consent calendar: the adoption of the minutes, the information request log, invoice from our independent legal counsel, Adam Ferber, and the approved recommendations log. If there are no questions on any of those, we'll just accept them as presented. Okay. I'm going to turn things over real quickly to Mac on membership, on the membership roster, or membership attendance log.
Yeah, I guess, you know, Don, to you, the key, you know, one on this is you know, whether you had a chance to talk to Mr. Burns about attendance.
Yes, I did. I'll talk to that. Well, I can talk to it now. It is unlikely that we will see Mr. Burns again. I've already talked with the head of the Building Trades Council, letting him know they need to find somebody. I don't know which is worse, having a vacant seat on the record or having a filled seat on the vacant, or on the roster with the guy, with the CBOC member not showing up. But if anybody wants to weigh in right now and suggest that I ask for a resignation from Mr. Burns, I'll do that, and I'm sure he'll submit it right away. Otherwise, just kind of let it sit there and until these building trades can find a replacement, just for a smooth transition. Any thoughts from anybody? Sally?
Yes, my suggestion would be to ask for his resignation, because we put the names of these folks into our annual report along with their background and why they were interested in it, and general public would think that they could contact said people and that they might know something, and since he doesn't know anything, I say take him off the list.
Okay. All right.
And then
Sorry.
I have another question, but I mean, I have another question having to do with Vanessa.
All right. Well, it has to do with the attendance log or about
Yes.
the roster? All right.
Yes, it has to do with the attendance log.
All right. Go ahead.
Okay. It appears that Vanessa is being marked as attending, and I thought she resigned. So
Well,
I'm confused.
Well, and I can unconfuse you on that one. It looks like somebody must have broken in and changed this form. And I'll go back and correct it.
Okay.
Thank you for pointing out yet another one of my
All right.
failures.
Well, I'm sorry. I didn't know,
No,
but it was confusing. Okay. So yeah, because again, this all comes from annual report work.
No.
I looked at that and wait a minute. Vanessa wasn't here. Was she here in 2019 and stuff like that? So
I can get that corrected very shortly, and before the meeting's over with.
Perfect. That would be
Wait,
great.
what the rest of you don't understand, aside from the two erroneous links that Sally pointed out, she sent me a text with the third one on there. So it's I guess I don't know what's happened to this agenda packet. So anything else on the roster? I mean, on the annual log. Okay, if you can just move to the next page, page 306 with the roster on there. We have an issue a statutory issue where we need to make sure that we've got the 5 mandatory positions filled. Okay, and when Vanessa did not renew her position as a parent, then Maisha volunteered to switch positions. So it opened up a Richmond position and it filled the statutory requirement. I did this earlier in the year to fill the senior, especially since I'm very definitely senior now. All right. But one other piece of information for you on there, we had the application on file from the solutions team. Okay, that was maybe a little over 2 years ago, and she never withdrew the application. And so I kept it on there. Well, she was with the Teamsters, but she's no longer with the Teamsters. So she's not part of that group anymore. Her application died. So that spot has been changed on the roster. That all make sense?
Yes.
Okay, Sally, your hand is still up. Did you have something to comment on? Okay. I won't go over the chairperson's reports. They're in the agenda packet. I sent copies of it to each of the CBOC members, either as they were happening or immediately after they were happening. But we have item O, which is page 315, the implementation of the forensic accounting investigation recommendations. We haven't really heard from Anton today, so I'll turn things over to him since this was his item.
Thank you, Mr. Gosney. The 77 recommendations that have not been verified, staff is committed to having the lead internal auditor view these. So that's my dog talking there in the background. Wants dinner.
Don't we all?
Dinner's at 4 o'clock. He always remembers. Lori, you're going to give. Lori's going to give.
Is Nathan here?
No, just Olive.
Come on.
So what I'm suggesting is that it's very important that this effort be done, because to the extent that our lead internal auditor can confirm that these items have been implemented, the probability of having the independent external auditor also agree is increased substantially. Recall on phase 1, we had 62 recommendations that were implemented and only about half of them were confirmed. So I think this would be useful. And in regards to that, and looking at the payroll information that we got for July and August, I didn't see any staff time of the lead internal auditor being working on this project. So that's a concern. That's the end of my report. I'd like to move approval.
Okay, you're making a particular motion.
Yes, sir.
Okay, what? Hang on, what? Scribbling down here. Do we
He
have
went
a
to the garage. Nathan got in the garage.
I'll second it. This is
All right.
Sally.
Okay, somebody else was talking. That's an open mic, I think. All right,
Oh, that was Lori.
All right. We have a motion and a second, but I would like to make an amendment to that motion. I stand behind what the intent here, but it's not enough in my mind. I'd like to make an amendment that we actually be provided with a list of all of the items with a brief description and if there's a resolution to it, what the resolution was. So that, because right now we're just talking numbers. You know, there's 52, 67. That doesn't really tell me anything. I want to know what is still outstanding.
Well, there is a list on.
I want it provided to us so we can include it in the in our agenda packet.
Well, okay, it's a public document. Melissa has that, so I don't think that's an issue. You want it as part of this agenda packet, or?
Well, not this particular note, for future ones.
Oh,
So we do this every month until we get it, until it get down to 0 left on.
okay. So what
result.
you're suggesting we just add that to the motion? I would be
That's
happy.
correct. That's the amendment to the motion.
I would be happy to accept that as a friendly amendment, and I appreciate it.
Okay.
If that's okay with my seconder?
More than okay. I was going to suggest the same thing. Sounds
right.
good.
Is there any discussion on this? Hearing no discussion. Will our secretary do, please? Okay.
Yeah, sorry, I wasn't going fast enough, Don.
Yeah.
Before we vote on this, I was hoping that maybe Melissa had a chance to kind of maybe give a quick update about what the plan is, so we at least have an understanding where we're headed once the PMP is implemented, and she may know what the overall plan is for the review by the internal auditor.
Yes, so I actually have an update to the update. So we'll call this breaking news. So for the phase 2, it's hard to keep these things straight sometimes. So there are 50 outstanding recommendations that Moss Adams is under contract to review. And that review was going to begin once all of the recommendations were deemed as implemented, of which really the recommendations that are remaining mostly have to do with policy. And there is a draft policy that went to the last board meeting, and I believe it's coming back to this board meeting this Wednesday. The other policy item is related to the CBOC. And so one of the things that was discussed at a previous implementation task force meeting was maybe beginning the phase 2 verification of implementation, because there's so many recommendations that are implemented really through the PMP. There's an absolute desire to get an updated status on the verification of implementation to the community and very specifically to this body. So then the breaking news is there was a Friday memo that's available on the board, and there is an action item going to the board this Wednesday. Dr. Wold is bringing the recommendation for 2 agreements. One of them is an agreement with, I believe it's
Ida Bailey.
Ida Bailey, to perform the compliance-only bond performance audit services for fiscal year 20, and a separate contract also for Ida Bailey to do the verification of implementation for all of the recommendations that were not deemed implemented by Moss Adams in their phase 1 review, kind of known colloquially in this group as phase 1.5. And so that is the recommendations that were deemed partially implemented, not implemented, and undetermined. And in addition to that, also doing a verification of implementation for the recommendations cumulative that were made in the Moss Adams fiscal year 2019 performance and program effectiveness audit. So in that audit, there were 2 that came out of the performance audit, one being the school facility consultant refund from 2017, and the other being the time cards for staff allocated with bond-funded salaries, and then the remaining being the program effectiveness audit. So that was a mouthful. I hope I got it all right. So effectively, going before the board as an action item this Wednesday are those 2 agreements for ID Bailey. And then in addition, it is really our intent to have the Moss Adams phase 2, which is under an existing contract, also happen within the fiscal year. So the desired result then being that before the conclusion of fiscal year 21, which would be before June 30 of 2021, there would be reports on the verification of implementation of all of the historical audit recommendations.
So Melissa, this is Mac, and since in this particular, I think that's great news, and I'm happy to see that we've got sort of this full coverage across the waterfront from the external folks. But this specific motion is related to the internal auditor reviewing internally before it goes out to the external auditors. And is there any update about that particular aspect of the?
Absolutely. I'm so sorry. I completely missed the question. Okay. So the internal review of verification of the implementation of the recommendations. So that's kind of a twofold. I want to give a 2-piece answer to that. So the first one is for each BLS forensic accounting investigation recommendation 112, there are individual work plans for each item. And one of the areas on the work plan is the internal auditor's review of the implementation of the recommendation. So I know that this work is work that is taking place. I do not have an update on its exact status, but I will be sharing this with our internal auditor, and we will produce these deliverables being requested to then come in a monthly update to this body. I think that's fantastic. The second piece is some of the recommendations that are part of the phase 2 for the Moss Adams contract actually have to do with auditing the implementation of the recommendation, and I don't have the exact number off the top of my head. But what BLS did in the 112 recommendations is really, they were looking at 16 different areas in the testing of controls. And so what they would do in one particular area, say contract administration, they said, do this, do this, do this. So it was like 8-1, 8-2, 8-3. And then the last item in 8 was, once all of these recommendations have been implemented and formalized process and procedure has been written, do an audit of the implementation of the recommendations. So some of the recommendations themselves that are part of phase 2 for Moss Adams are specifically calling for the audit of implementation, of which again, the internal auditor will have a written section in the work plan describing their review of verification, which, as Mr. Youngher pointed out, that is like that's the check, right? That's the teacher who says, you turned it in and it's complete or it's not, and that really does help us shore up our implementation before the third-party independent verification of implementation is to take place. So in order to achieve everything that we spoke of, which is this third-party verification of implementation within this fiscal year, the internal auditor's review is something that is ongoing and needs to be completed with the highest of priority. And so I think it's great to bring an update to this body. And I can't speak on her behalf, but we'll be sure to provide all of the information from today's meeting with her. Hopefully this time I got the question right. Sorry about that, Max.
I see Anton has his hand raised.
Still there, Anton?
Yes, sir, I am here. I just have to unmute. I want to speak to the Melissa's breaking news because it's very distressing to me that Dr. Wall indicated to us several months ago that there would be an RFQ for these performance audits. That was not done. It's on the agenda for Wednesday, so it was not communicated to the CBOC that this was going to happen so that we could have an opportunity to comment on it. So it looks like working in partnership didn't work in this instance. The staff put this forward to the board for action on Wednesday, did not notify the CBOC so that we could discuss it prior to that happening. And the net result of the staff's action, is that $56 million of fiscal 2020 bond expenditures will not be audited for effectiveness and results. And I submit that that is not a good practice. That is not what the CBOC recommended. I don't think that is a good outcome for the public to have $56 million of expenditures for last year that are not going to be audited for effectiveness and results. And I am very disappointed. I am very disappointed that the staff would not go out with the RFQ as they said they would. They did not communicate with the CBOC in terms of their plan. And I am very disappointed. And I would submit that this is not the way we should work in partnership.
Sally, you have your hand
I have a question about the auditors. I.D. Bailey. Is that the name of the auditor?
Yes.
So I haven't heard that name before. And I know nothing about them. And I think this tags on to maybe what Anton is saying in the sense that there's an action item coming up on Wednesday and we haven't had a chance to look at it or comment on it and until now. And so, you know, we're familiar with Moss Adams and others. That doesn't mean that I.D. Bailey doesn't have project accounting and project construction background, but it'd be interesting to know if they did and if that was asked and so forth and so on.
Anton, your hand is still up. Is it supposed to be?
No.
Okay, take it down. Is there any other discussion or questions? Hearing none, then let's have a roll call vote, please.
Don, do you want to vote on the amendment and the main motion separately or together?
Well, for ease of convenience right now, let's just do it as together. We'll talk more about friendly amendments, unfriendly amendments offline.
That is fine. Okay. John Anderson.
Yes.
Ken Burns is absent. Maisha Cole. I'll let her.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, excellent. So that was a yes vote.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Sally DeWitt,
Yes.
Lupe Inyana,
Yes.
John Gosney,
Yes.
Rain Humes,
Yes.
Anton Yu here,
Yes.
and Mackmore, yes. Okay, so we have 8 yeses. Motion passes.
All right. We have eight yeses, 0 no, 0 abstain, 1 absent. So we got 8, 0, 0, 1. Okay. We will then move on. Oh my goodness, we got an annual report apparently. Turn things over to Sally and Lorraine.
Okay, so this is going to be, I think it's going to be fairly short. This was envisioned as a discussion item. We have posted it and let people, and people have seen it, I think, and certainly their piece of it. So one of the things that I want to say, and I'll ask Lorraine if she wants to add anything when I'm all done here. I want to thank everybody for the input that they gave. In particular, besides our committee, with John Anderson, who's a wonderful addition to our committee, and Lorraine has worked very, very hard. Mac, you did a terrific job in the executive summary and in I think at least one other section and an appendix. So there was a lot of hard work that went into this, and so that's my first acknowledgement, is that everybody made a contribution, and I really appreciate it. I think we've got something that we can work with here. We're supposed to be looking at this time around as a first draft, and then the next time you're going to see this is going to be actually just a few weeks from now in November, and then I hope that we'll see a general thumbs up on it. I've been the chair of this committee off and on for the last 4 years, and mostly on, and this is the least controversial report. I don't think that there's anything that really compared to some of our prior reports where we were really struggling with it. The only thing that came up was what I discussed earlier when we saw that there was a piece of multi-millions of dollars approved for facility projects. Well, I'm calling them facility projects. They were approved for school projects in 2019, and they weren't showing up on our report except as a footnote to one of our notes in report 13. And I just didn't think that that was sufficient. And I know that Mac and Greg struggled with this in the interim report. Actually, that's how it came to light, at least one of the ways, and the $3.6 million. And so we dove in deeper, and we took as our guiding light that we didn't want to put anything in this report, in our CBOC annual report, that would cause anybody in the general public to have to call either us or a staff member to understand. We wanted all of the information to be in generally available public reports in a way that made sense. And this would include media people if they looked at our annual report and then wanted to write something up. So that was our guiding light, and so I will call your attention without going through it in great detail. You're welcome to discuss it now, or you're welcome to bring it, up with us after the fact. And but how we handled that particular issue, you can see in the executive summary on page. Hang on just a second. It's on page 4 in the executive summary as just a note about the supplemental funds used. And the additional note being that the district, we don't have access. The CBOC is unaware of a public report showing project budget and expenditure totals for schools funded by sources other than bond revenue and state grants. I I think coming out of this meeting, my intent is to talk again to Melissa and see if we could clarify that at any level. Otherwise, that comment couldn't stand on its own. And that comment comes back up again in section 3. And then it also is referenced as part of the long-range facility plan in master plan in section 6. And a lot of credit goes to Lorraine here for working on the chart that's in section 6, where she was committed to listing all the schools in the facility master plan, either in the implementation plan project model 1 or in the future plan. And by the way, if you're going to flip up there, yeah, okay, that would be on page 27. Very good. And then on page 28, the future plan projects were listed. And this was corresponded with note number 5 in report 13. So we followed that report and we put that into our report. And then Lorraine added up, what the current budget was and tried to tie that back to other existing public reports. So those were just the only 2 areas, and actually they're tied together. They had to do with those supplemental funds. And those were the only 2 areas that we struggled with. And we did struggle with it mightily, but we finally came down on, this is what happened. These were reported in report 13, and that's the explanation for it. Actually, those comments were not carried into 2020, so we commented on that. And that's where we left it. Just this is as much as we know about it in our public reports. And so I can see where a lot of that was clarified in 2020 in the PMP. And I think that will come out in the 2020 report. This is the 2019 report with the 2019, public reports. Let me see, there are a couple of other tiny little things. Anton had brought up some changes, technical changes. He passed around to everybody. There was Appendix B that had to do with the tax rates that we needed updated, and Melissa has already brought that up to our attention, and with some late breaking news with that beautiful report that I think is coming out of the PMP, and we can certainly make use of that. We're waiting for that. And then there's that's it. Those are the technical issues. Other than that, I think we're ready to go. Maureen?
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I wanted to mention on back to the chart on page 343. What I was trying to do with this is to give the people an idea of what has been done, what we're doing now, and what needs to be done in the future with the 2016 FMP. So I consolidated data from 3 of your reports, Melissa. I took it from the report 13, your note 5, that chart, and I took the 2016 estimated budgets from that. I also kept it in the same format. The schools are in the same order, and I used the whole amounts of the money. I didn't round it off, so that they could look at that report and see the same numbers. Then we went to the your consolidated reports for the project status, that and report 2. And we're showing them, what the status is. Then we went to for the future projects, this year's annual report, we'll put it up with the other chart, but at this point it wasn't. And we just said more or less that these amounts they've been approved, but they have to be paid for from the bond issues when they're sold. would you just look over the chart and see if it looks all right to you? Not right now, and send me an email on it, okay?
Absolutely. I have very minor notes, and so I thought probably the easiest way to share that was if I just send an email. So should I send that to
Send it to me. You can send it to
Sally
me.
and John, or just because yeah, I can send the email however you'd like me to. I have just minor notes from the
Yeah.
draft.
Send it to me and I'll take it to our committee.
Terrific. I'll do that.
Thank you very much.
And I also, just for the record, I do still owe a couple of reports, and then I noticed that there was a part where it said demolition of Wilson in the report, so I was gonna send a couple pictures for that too.
Oh, I have some pictures I'm going to well, I'm going to try to do it myself. But if I can, I'll ask you for them.
Okay, great.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Okay, we had Anton's hand up, then Max.
Thank you. I think, in my opinion, this is the best annual report that the CBOC has produced in its entire history. I'm very impressed. Appreciate Sally and Lorraine and John on their effort.
Thank you.
Okay, Mac.
Thank you. So I echo Anton's perspective. I think this process went very well this year. I think we've got a good format that is really kind of taking shape here. I do have some very high level comments that I wanted to get out in the public for people to consider as we move forward to something where you're actually going to vote on approving the thing. So number one, I think, and it's pretty important to me that we refer to Michelle Obama School throughout. I recognize that there was a historical name here, but I think we should be looking forward and not back. And I think we can easily address this by applying footnotes in where the Wilson project may have been referred to in the historical report. So that's number one. Number two, I would like we have had a sort of a standard way of stating our compliance opinion. And in the past several years, we have indicated that compliance opinion A, which relates to confirming that that spending was only on the school projects and not for any other purpose, we have said that the district was not in compliance. When I think it may be more appropriate to say that we cannot determine that. Because I think that's what if you look into the words of what we say, I think that's really what is meant. So slight change there, but I would like for folks to maybe take a look at that and consider if that's the appropriate approach. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mac. I've got to agree with Mac about the name Michelle Obama School. We never really refer to the Sylvester Greenwood Academy as Sylvester Greenwood, formerly Gompers, formerly Richmond City Hall. We didn't rename the school that was there. We tore down Woodrow Wilson Elementary School and we built a new school. The new school is the Michelle Obama School. And correct me, Louis, on this, I may be mistaken. Is it the official name, the Michelle Obama Elementary School or the Michelle Obama School?
Michelle Obama School.
That's what I thought, especially because that's what the sign out front says. So maybe we can correct that throughout the document. So it doesn't say elementary school. I believe that was left in there to give them latitude to increase the grade level in the future. But I'm also curious, and please help me out on this. Why are we giving advertisement to the punctuation plain and simple by Edward C. Alvord and Jean A. Alvord on there? Why do we have to list what guide we're using for punctuating this?
I can answer that question.
That's why I'm asking you.
Oh, okay. So there were last year and this year there were, because we haven't got the whole CBOC adding data, adding commentary and work and editing it. Some of us were taught to put numbers in before, that are less than 10 as written out as a word. And then other numbers that were greater than 10 as numerals. And others of us were taught differently. So in order not to have a document that was captured, was consistent throughout, we adopted, this was done last year, we adopted a particular guide for that type of thing. That's just an example. And so when we had differences of opinion about whose teacher said what and when and so forth about punctuation or grammar or whatever, we went back to our guide just to keep the document professional and consistent.
I have no problem with what you did. With the issue I've got is putting it on the title page and advertising for this book. I don't think it's necessary. If somebody has a question or a problem with what the committee has done on punctuation or something like that, that's an internal discussion. But I just don't feel it's necessary to put it on the cover page of the annual report. Okay.
Okay, so noted. Thank you.
Anton, your hand is still up. You have another comment?
Yes, sir. In regards to the what we're talking about in the punctuation, I completely support having that on there. This is very common in reports where they indicate the style guide. A lot of people use the AP style guide. The New York Times has a style guide, and in a lot of public reports, they disclose what style guide they're using. I think it would be particularly important for us because we're going to have different people in subsequent years prepare these reports, and I think knowing what style guide was used previously is helpful, and having it on the cover page I think is useful. In regards to Mac's comment, on page 335 in the packet, we actually did back what you suggested, which says it cannot be determined, and we made that change last year, and we carried that forward this year. But what's new this year, Mac, is the comment that you suggested. And what it says is, right under that comment B, it says the CBOC did determine that bond funds were only expended on 2016 facility master plan projects as approved by the Board of Education, with the exception noted in section A above, and section A above speaks to the audit exception. So that was what you had suggested last year. So we did incorporate that in the compliance opinion, and the language cannot be determined is consistent with what we did last year for the first time. As you recall, prior to last year, it said no. Now it says cannot be determined. So I think we've done what you suggested.
So just a quick interjection here out of turn. I was thinking about compliance A. So in the table, you can see it says no, and I think that's where that was the one that I wanted to,
And A speaks to the use of, the allocation of salaries, right?
Correct.
And that still hasn't been resolved.
Well, it's the documentation of it, right? So that's, I think, is the issue at hand, is we don't know for sure that it was done out of compliance. So that's, we have no evidence to suggest one way or the other.
Auditor said it wasn't compliance.
Well, so I think that their statement was that they couldn't determine because there was no.
You can't determine it. You can't say it's in compliance. So it's.
Well, okay. So this is what we're having the discussion that I wanted
so
to.
you're talking about I thought you were talking about B.
No, yeah, I meant A if I referred to B.
Okay, Lorraine, you had your hand up.
Yes, I just wanted to speak to the idea of Wilson and Michelle Obama. The reason we had Wilson in there was because in none of the financial reports or the FMP reports in the agenda packets for 2019 do they mention Michelle Obama, because the name was not changed until after that date. So I think to be consistent with the reports, that we should keep it Wilson and then have the footnote, as we did in the executive summary, saying that it has been changed to Michelle Obama on such and such a date. You're suggesting we put a footnote every time we use it, and I don't see the need for that.
You say you, who are you referring to?
Max said that.
I think she may have said Mac. So I'm going to respond to that. So I think, you know, it's a matter of adding a footnote to a couple of financial reports that are in the back of the body of reports, so in the appendices. And I just, again, I think you could do it either way, but I think it's important that the community decided that this it was time for a new name for the school. And I think our report should reflect the will of the community and not preserve something just because, you know, a year or 2 years ago, we're publishing this report in the current time frame, that people should recognize that this is the appropriate name for the school. So we can have that discussion. We don't need to debate it now, but that's, you know, I feel pretty strongly about it.
Fine.
Are there any other comments? Sally, your hand is still up.
Well, that was wrong. It should come down. So I'll take it down.
Okay. Well, we thank you, everybody, for the annual report presentation. We've got ourselves a hefty document there with lots of information for everybody to go through. All right, let's move on to item Q, the audit schedules, and turn that over to Anton, please.
No change from last month. So there's not much to talk about. We will update that based on the action of the board on Wednesday. End of my report.
I like those kinds of reports. All right. Item R on the agenda, on the CBOC website update. And Louis, I'm going to tap into you because things have changed since last month on the CBOC access to the CBOC website. So perhaps you can explain what has happened.
So we've turned over the updating of the website to the CBOC committee itself. So I believe Don has been working with our communications staff in order to get access to the website.
I thank you for that update, and I thank you for trusting us with our website. It's hopefully we won't let people down. There's going to be an awful lot of work for everybody to do on that. You know, our website is not like a lot of the other site websites. We've got maybe 1,000 items on there as opposed to just a couple of dozen items on there. And we need to figure out where we stand on a lot of the items. And I'm just proposing right now, this is just open discussion. But what I want to do is to, by the way, just last Tuesday, I sat down on a virtual meeting with Rochelle Forrest with the communications department, and she did an outstanding job of giving me a tutorial on how to work things. And I just hope that by tomorrow morning, I'll still remember at least some of it. But the smartest thing she did is she gave me a phone number saying, give me a call if you run into problems. And I will take advantage of that. I love tech help phone lines. But what I'd like to do is I'll send out offline, I'll send out kind of a request with the various items on there. What the hope is that our CBOC members will volunteer to take on an item like our minutes on the library, the other documents. What I'd like to do is on each one of these things create a spreadsheet so that we can keep track of it with the name of the item, the URL of the item, the status of the item. And for instance, on the minutes, we would want to check all of the links on the minutes to find out, are they live, are they dead, or like this agenda packet where they take you in a misdirect to some other different part of the universe. But we want to look at each one of these items so we can and keep it on the spreadsheet as a log so we have some idea, this is where we stand on these things. But also, what I want us to do is be able to look at our website, say, the things that are on there, do we need these things on there? And what else do we need? What do we think that the public wants to be able to have access to? And one of the first things I thought we might try to do is when the time is appropriate, we'll make arrangements to go out and get a nice high-res photograph of the front of the new Obama school to replace the photograph of Pinole Valley High School. That was then, this is now. And perhaps another year and a half, we can do the same thing with Lake as the schools move on. You might recall for about 10 years, we had a picture of El Cerrito High School because that was the big project at the time. Again, I want to be able to put this out to everybody. Hopefully we're going to have volunteers that are willing to do things. And when we do this, we'll give a time schedule. You know, when do you think that you can have this for us? Okay, this is not going to happen overnight. This is going to take a long time. It's going to take a lot of effort by people. You know, some of the things like the bond language, because I'm going to volunteer to do that right off the bat, because you've only got 4 items on there, and I've already provided one of them. I can make that happen and make it through all the same format and everything. But the minutes, the agenda packets, that's going to take several people a fair amount of time because we've got almost 20 years worth and 12 sets per year. So it's about 250 sets of minutes, about 250 agenda packets. That's not going to happen overnight. So, but these are my thoughts on this. But I'm seeing right now, I didn't see whose hand came up first, so I'm just going to go for the top, Anton, and then Lorraine.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. I think this is a historic announcement that you made. I would make a plea that that's be recorded in the minutes. And I would like to thank Louis Fries and the staff, the district, for making this decision. Because as you know, the CBOC has been requesting this for some time. And in a broader context, I would like you to be aware that statewide, this is an issue. And that the California Association of Bond Oversight Committee in their legislative program for next year, 2021, is considering making an amendment to the education code, which would provide that CBOCs have the authority to update their own website, as this is an issue throughout the state. So in this regards, West Contra Costa can be a leader in that regard. And I'm going to ask Mr. Fries for a letter that I can use with the legislature that would support our legislative bill. I think this is historic. I want to thank Louis and the staff and the district for this effort. I think it's outstanding. And I would like to move your motion, Mr. Chairperson.
Well, it wasn't really a motion. It was just a discussion on there. And I thank you for all of that.
Well, it's on for action, sir.
Well, that's just in case we actually had a motion.
Well, I'd like to make a motion.
Where is that motion?
My motion is that we support the plan in the agenda packet for updating the website.
I like that phrase, support the plan. Do we have a second to that?
I'll second it.
All right, Lorraine Humes. Okay, on discussion, before we even get to discussion, I just want to point out that this is not turning over control of the site to the CBOC. It is giving us access. There are certain things that we still need the help and assistance of staff on, like on the calendar that is mixed in with the calendar on the district's website. So, I mean, like that, for instance, yes, just the dates of our meetings. You know, they would be on multiple sites, so they still ask for the district's help on doing that kind of thing. All we're talking about is specific content that is specific to our site. Okay, now Lorraine, you had your hand up. I don't know if you had more to say than just what you already did.
Yes, I do.
All right.
I just wanted to also thank you very much for doing this. I think it's and for supporting us in this. I appreciate that. And also, I was wondering if on the school district website, Louis, a lot of people don't know, they know we're doing school construction and they're very interested in it, but they don't know about the facilities committee. Is there any way we could get, you could get a main sign there, just say school construction, and then it could go to another link that would say facilities committee and CBOC. So the public could get to it easier. Because they don't even know about CBOC right now either. I mean,
You can't even say it.
I know. Too difficult.
We could work on that. We already have a link that takes us right to the facilities page, the master plan, so maybe we can actually work on a way we update that link.
Yeah, I think it'd be good advertising for you too. You know, your department.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have any other comments on?
Yes, I have a comment.
All right.
I want to reiterate what Anton says, that the West Contra Costa can be a real leader in this at the state level. And I'm just going to add another comment, which is that the PMP, and if we can get the facility master plan to capture 100% of the projects, I would say that it is also a model for other districts. I'm like I said, I was a cheerleader. I'm out here going, yay, but we just need to make that little scope change, in my view. So anyway, it's a great job. Great job.
Well, again, I like everybody else here. Yeah, I've been part of this. I've been fighting to try to give us that access. I'm very, very pleased that the district is agreeing to do that. I don't know who is responsible, but since we're dealing with Lewis and Melissa and Ellen right now, I'm gonna throw the praise right on their laps and say thank you very much. Now, I just got to make sure that we, and more importantly me, that I don't fall on my face. We're going to be a state model. As they say, Don, don't screw it up. All right, let's go ahead and Mac, and if we have no more, I'm sorry, Lorraine, your hand's up. Now Anton again.
Okay. Melissa, I just wanted to say that we can have your, do the performance item on there that deals with the CBOC website. It's been on there for a couple years now, so we can maybe get that done for you and you can get that off your list.
Well, and that's actually what I've been thinking. We really appreciate how thankful and the gratitude that you guys share, but it is such a Herculean task. I feel like we're supposed to be saying thank you to you, because this is a major undertaking and it is a lot of work. But I do really believe that it's going to be a fantastic resource for the community, and just really appreciate all of you and your continued service, because, you know, when you talk about a state model, I can't imagine finding this kind of resource and support anywhere else. And so just thank all of you for, you know, being committed to this and making it happen. It is going to be a fantastic resource. And we're still partners in all of this. And so communications is a resource for you, and we want to be a resource for you. And we're just really happy that you're willing to take on the task of really being the workforce behind this, so that it can be what it should be. So
great.
Okay. Anton, your hand's up again.
Yes, I would look forward to working with the chairperson and updating our bylaws, which are 2 years behind.
Sorry, that's not on the agenda right now, so I'm sorry, we can't talk about that right now. But let's go ahead and let's go. Since we've got 5 minutes left, we got 4 items left here, or 3. Let's have this vote real quick.
Yeah, could Anton perhaps restate the motion, just so I had that clear?
The motion was to approve the plan for updating the website.
Got it. Okay, thank you. Okay, John Anderson.
Yes.
Ken Burns is absent. Maisha Cole.
Yes.
Sally DeWitt.
Yes.
Lupe Anyana.
Yes.
Don Gosney.
Yes.
Lorraine Humes.
Yes.
Anton Junghair.
Yes.
And Mac Moore, yes.
Okay, so we have, once again, 8001. Motion passes. Okay. Let the fun begin. Now you're also enthusiastic about making this happen. When I send those emails out and asking for volunteers, I don't want dead silence. That's not going to cut it, people. Because I will do what I can to go on record, on tape, on YouTube, and embarrass people if they don't step up. Because I am not doing this all by myself. Okay. Since we're done with that, let's go on to item number 7, the calendar. Pretty straightforward. We've got 3 meetings left. Whoa, only 2 meetings left this year. Future agenda items. Okay. Do we have any future agenda items anybody wants me to throw on that list?
Yes.
Lorraine?
I was wondering, since a lot of what we saw today is an excellent training for the committee, et cetera, I'd like to continue that. And Don, when you go to the Facilities Master Plan Prioritization Committee, if maybe each month you could just tell us a little bit about it and how it's going.
Oh, you can count on me giving a report every time. And if I'm 99% sure that these are all going to be recorded, and I'll make sure we provide a link. Because I know staff will share the link with me because they're good people. And we just share the link with as many people as we can so they can see and hear what was brought up, what was discussed.
Because there are several ways you can learn stuff, and I think that's bringing that stuff back. Maybe Mac bringing back the FAI committee, just giving us a blurb what happened that month, type thing.
Yeah. All right. Hang on, I'm scribbling where I can still read it tomorrow. Any other future agenda items that people would like to discuss? All right, I'm not seeing any. I'm not hearing any. Our next scheduled CBOC meeting is November 9th. Shorter period between meetings. So it's really only talking about 3 weeks now. All right. Yeah. If there's nothing else, since we're now at only 2 hours and 58 minutes from the time we started, we will stand adjourned.
Thank you, Don.
Thank you.
Thank you again, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
A nice short meeting.